All right, so we've explained this before, but I'm going to do that again. Talking about JavaScript objects, I think it's quite important that you understand a couple of concepts about objects in JavaScript, and I'm going to be explaining some of those concepts. So we're going to talk about the object method first, and then we'll talk about constructor function, and we'll follow up with a couple of other topics. Things like the this operator. We'll talk about object properties, and we'll probably end this session talking about for in loops, right? Okay, so let's get started already. Basically, talking about JavaScript object methods, what we are basically referring to, the developers trying to put in a bunch of behavior, as an attachment into the object itself. So, giving an example, let's say we are referring to a user object here, for example. So I'm going to say we have let's probably mav equals. So we have a very simple object with several properties. We have properties such as name. I'm going to change this to John, so I can have John Doe, as a name. And then we're going to have like age, and we're going to have like 16. Then we'll have like departments. Yeah, maybe departments, computer science. All right. So the thing about working with objects, you can basically log this, right? So we can say console.log John, and you expect to see this when you run objects, constructor functions. So I think we probably run the wrong file. So that was the wrong file. So it should be objects, JavaScript object. Okay, good. So now we're able to run this file, and you see we have the result as expected, right? You have an object with the following details. One thing you'll be able to do as well, you basically can print some of the properties, right? Like name. And there are several ways to access this, right? So you can also access it using the square brackets. So you have name, right? And this would give you the same output. So sometimes, you might come across a bunch of values that look like this. Let's say dates of birth, right? And this is also valid JavaScript. So we can say probably 22. Just a random value, okay? So in order to access something like this, of course, you don't want to use the dot operator, because this will not work with the dot operator. Rather, you can just have the square brackets, do the job for you. I would advise, you call or you name your, that's wrong. Yeah, so I would advise you name your properties that way. This is not a good way to name your properties, but just in case you come across this, you just need to understand that, this is actually correct, okay? So talking about the object methods, what exactly is the importance of the object method? So the object method is just appending a function, right, inside the object. And when you have a function inside an object, it's basically referred to as a method. So we can have something like greets, right? So you can have like greets, and then you can this can basically the greets can basically of course be a function that would probably just console.log let's just return hello, right? So which means we can probably call console.log greet. It has to be john.greet, right? So john.greet, we are accessing that from greet, and running this, you see we have hello. Basically, we've been able to create a function in here, and it's also possible to access some of the properties you have here by simply referencing them, right? So we can say let's just say hello with this option. So we have this, and we call name, right? So name. Okay, I think I'm making a mistake here. Okay, so let's work with this.name, and I'm going to explain why I'm doing this in a bit. So we have hello John Doe. What if we just have the name right here? I have to run this again. Okay, all right, so it's saying name is not defined. And basically, we have this error basically because you can't access this directly except you work with this keyword, which is then going to refer to the properties within the object itself. Yeah, and this would work when you have something like this, globalities.name, right? So let's see what we get here now. You see, this is actually pointing to the values you have right within the object here. So yeah, similarly, you can also change this, right? So you can also change this to Mav, and now you work with Mav, you work with the scope, right? This is our scope right here, and this is now referring to what you have within the scope. So you might be tempted to also try the let's say we have grid 1. We might want to try this option where you have work with the arrow. Yeah, I think we should have a comma here. Okay, so what happens when we try to do this? Remember, I once explained that arrow functions do not have the this operator. This would not work within this code. So if we execute this by running grid 1, yeah, so let's go ahead and try this. You see, we still work with Mav basically because we have Mav right here. So let's take that off. You see, it says name is not defined. So what if we try to call this.name, right? And we run this again. So now you see it's undefined. It's undefined because it basically cannot find this. Okay, so this operator definitely has no effect within the arrow function. So yeah, you just need to know when to use the arrow functions and when not to use the arrow functions. So let's take this off for now, and we'll talk about arrow functions more in later videos. Yeah, so basically, what we've done here is we've been able to create a very simple object method. It's also possible to extend this, outside the scope of our object. So basically, we can have John.greet, in here, and of course, now we have a function, and we can still make do with that function, right? You see, we can still run that, and it works perfectly. We'll talk about the constructor function now, and yeah, I'll show you a better way to work with this. So yeah, let's take this off, and yeah, let's take this off as well. Take off the comma. All right, so I think that's fine. Try this once more. All right, beautiful. So this works, and let's move on to the constructor function. Yeah, so basically, just like the name, the constructor, what we're trying to do is, we're basically trying to create an object, that can serve as a constructor, and it can be reused, right? It can be reused in creating more objects, with similar blueprints, right? So I'm going to show a quick example. I'm going to show a quick example so you see how that works. So let's assume we are trying to model, like employees. So I'm going to say we have like let employees equals yeah. So within this employee object, what I'm going to do right now is to create. Yeah, what I'm going to do right now is to create a very simple list of item. So it's going to be quite. Yeah, it's going to be quite straightforward here, right? So let's assume this is an employee who should, who would have a first name, right? This should have a first name. So I'm going to say, this is an example, right? So let's just say John and a last name. And let's say Henry, for example, right? John and Henry. Okay, now we want to be able to have a function that can serve as a constructor, to create a bunch of objects, a bunch of objects. So in order to do this, I would say let's yeah, we can just say function. Let's say employee, right? So now we have we're going to bring in the first name, and we're also going to bring in the last name. Okay, and within the function, we can say this that first name equals first name. So we're trying to create a new context in here. This dot first name is going to refer to this first name, which means when we create a new employee, we're going to have the property of first name, and it's going to assign we're going to assign the value that was passed into the object, the value, which is the parameter. These are the parameters. So the value you pass in, which is also known as the arguments, will be passed into this object, right? So this dot last name is equals last name. All right. So let's say we decide to create a new. So I'm going to say new. Let employee one equals a new employee, right? And here we're going to have John. Probably will complete the detail of the new employee, which is employee.first name, right? So we're picking John, right? And employee.last name. So let's see if we log employee one, okay? So we're logging employee one. This time around, we're calling node, and we are going to call constructor, so basically objects, right? Then constructor functions. So now you see we have a new employee with the following details. And yeah, so why is this very important? Or why is it important to know this? Of course, we have new patterns to create stuff like this, so we can use classes now. And of course, classes have a better way to work with objects and constructors and basically inheritance and all that stuff. Yeah, so I think you need to understand that this is basically how we create objects. Previously, I mean, a lot of people still do it this way, but this is how we do it previously in JavaScript. And of course, you can still do it today, but I would advise you use the classes because the interface is a bit more clean and robust as well in terms of what you are able to do, the way you can extend the classes and all that. Yeah, but what we can also do here is adding our functions, right? So we can add our functions to say greet, right? And this equals a function. So we can say return hello, right? Or we can also say return hello with our first name and last name mixed in together. So let's just say we have first name and also the last name. So I'm going to call this the first name just as we did the other time, and this the last name, right? So if we go ahead to say console log employee one greet, which is a method, right? So what we'll get is hello John Henry, right? So you see that this is actually not so bad in terms of how to model these objects. Now you don't have to create objects this way. You can always create new objects from a constructor object, right? And yeah, so you might be asking questions like, okay, can we also can we also call this operator if we have arrow functions in the constructor method? Basically, that won't work as well, right? The arrow function would not work with this, right? You can actually pass the value you have in here, but it won't work with this. So JavaScript constructors, they are basically regular functions that you use in creating multiple objects, right? I think that's the summary of the idea behind the constructor functions. This context, the context of the object in this case, right? We also have what we refer to as the globalities. So basically, I think you need to understand that the difference here is the globalities basically refers to the global object, right? The global object, when working with your browser, that would basically refer to the window, right? And when working with JavaScript, that would when working with Node, would basically refer to the global object itself. So the global object in your browser is the window object, where you have window dot local storage and those stuff. And in Node, you have the global object itself. So an example, we can call this global. So we can say sorry. Oh yeah, I think we can only use this within a module, by the way. I'm not sure if it will work here, but if we say global dots user, or let's say full name, this equals John. Okay, so if I go ahead to console.log, let's see full name. So let's see what we're going to have here. So John, okay, and that means yeah. So by using global.fullname, I automatically set this as a global. And if I have this file, if I have this file imported into a different file, so let's try out something here. If I have a different file, I'm going to call this. Let's just call this file print.js. So we're about to import this.js into print.js by simply saying, so I'm simply going to say conf this equals require. This is not a model, by the way, so I'm going to require this, right? So let's see. I can't call it this, right? So let's say let's just call it file. Let's just call it file. Then we have file.fullname. Trying to access the full name object. So what if I say console.log full name right here? Since this is imported, I'm definitely not certain that this might work, but let's try this. So if I say node objects /print, and I have a mistake right here, so that's the node. So yeah, I mean this still works. I mean this is great, but without this file, let's see. Yeah, so you see it doesn't work anymore. So basically, by making that a global item, even without importing it here, you see it works perfectly. So I think you should know when to use globals. Try as much as possible to stay away from it if you don't need to use it. A lot of people say, a lot of people would say it is bad to use it because yes, of course, you might forget the fact that you have a particular global item declared somewhere, so ensure you have a proper documentation on what you've made a global variable or a global object within your program or within your software. So I think with the right set of documentation, working with globals is not going to be a problem, depending on the scale and the way you use it. So yeah. So basically, that is it for the this keyword. We'll definitely explore this more when building applications, with Express, right? When building applications with Express and Node.js. But for now, you need to understand that the this keyword is basically referring to the objects, that you're the object that is being accessed from, the object that holds the context of that particular execution or that particular call. Right. So when working with your browser, this will definitely refer to the window object. When working with Node, it refers to the global object. So yeah. The next thing we'll be looking at this in the next video, and we'll be talking about the for in loop, right? For in loop. Go ahead and read up on that. We'll also explain that in a different video. We'll talk about the for in loop. We'll talk about the object properties, right? So we talk about the own properties, the object of values, the object of entries, and we'll also talk about object destructuring, which I've explained to you already, but we'll talk about that again in a different fashion, and we'll also cover optional chaining operator in the next class. So that is it for now, and I'll see you in the next class.